If you don't want a divorce, get out of this house right now. All right. These words hit me like a thunderbolt from my husband. I was stunned. He must have been very confident that I wouldn't file for divorce or resort to such intimidation. When I couldn't take it anymore, I decided to seek advice from someone else. My name is Anna, a 30-year-old office worker. My husband James and I are approaching our 5th wedding anniversary. We're still waiting for the blessing of a child, which has led to relentless questioning from my mother-in-law about when she can expect grandchildren. My father-in-law passed away years ago, and my mother-in-law lives on the inheritance he left behind. Honestly, her constant prodding about grandchildren is pushing me to the brink of a nervous breakdown. In fact, I might already be there. Despite seeing me in this state, James doesn't lift a finger to help. He has even started siding with his mother, blaming me for our troubles. I used to adore him for his kindness when we were dating, but after we got married, his attitude completely changed. Without consulting me, he decided we would live near his childhood home. On my days off from work, I am summoned to his parents' house and made to do housework all day long. Naturally, there are no breaks. While I'm busy with chores at his parents' house, the two of them either go out together or stay in, watching TV and laughing. I was once yelled at for making too much noise with the vacuum cleaner. After that, I was forbidden to use it and was told to clean with a broom and a rag instead. Then my sister-in-law moved back home. She had been living in a neighboring town, but due to some personality conflict, she recently returned. Her arrival only added to my burden. She has a 4-year-old daughter and expects me to make her child's lunch every day. When I tell her it's impossible because of my job, my mother-in-law yells, "Your sister-in-law is dealing with the aftermath of a divorce." My husband chimes in, "Don't you want to be useful to the family?" And my sister-in-law adds, "It'll be good practice for when you have a child of your own, so you should be thankful." So I end up waking up at 4 a.m. every morning. I make my niece's lunchbox and breakfast for my in-laws, then head back to my place, finish my own housework, and go to work. This brutal routine has been forced upon me. My husband, of course, doesn't lift a finger to help with any household chores. The only time I get to rest is during my break at work. One day, after enduring this exhausting routine for a while, my husband dropped a bombshell on me. "Oh, by the way, Anna, you should quit your job." "What?" "I've talked it over with my mom and sister. You know she's going through a rough time. You understand?" "No, I don't get what you're saying." "Listen, I mean quit your job and take care of the house," he snapped before storming off to take a bath. I couldn't see the connection between my sister-in-law's divorce and me quitting my job. My husband is stuck in a dead-end job, and there are months when I earn more than him. Does he really think we could live off his salary alone? Neither my mother-in-law nor my sister-in-law works. I can't understand why they can't handle the housework themselves. Feeling overwhelmed, I grabbed my car keys and drove to the one place that came to mind, my childhood home. It was a bit of a drive from our current apartment, and since my parents had moved overseas, no one lived there now. I avoided telling them about my troubles because they were the worrying type. Whenever something unpleasant happened, I found solace here. It was a refuge filled with cherished memories. Lost in these thoughts, my phone rang. It was my husband. "Hey, I just got out of the bath and you're gone. Are you back at your parents' place again?" "Yes, and so what? Could you stop running back home every time something goes wrong? We're not kids." Despite my husband's fondness for my parents' house, his words felt hollow. "I'll be working from here for a while. And no, I won't be going to your parents' house either." "Well, come back home now." Defeated by his insistence, I returned to our house. Soon after, I quit my cherished job in the fashion industry. My clueless coworkers speculated that I might be pregnant. I was given no free time and was expected to manage the household all day, even when I was sick with a high fever. No one seemed to care. I had become a servant in my own home, a slave to be blunt. Then amidst this grueling routine, something unexpected happened. My sister-in-law was getting remarried. To top it off, her fiancé was an executive at a major corporation, earning a substantial income. It was a shocking turn of events. My sister-in-law isn't exactly a beauty, and her personality leaves much to be desired. I understood that everyone has different tastes and there are all sorts of people out there. Nevertheless, the entire in-law family was celebrating, exclaiming about how she was marrying into money. With a sense of pride, my sister-in-law showed me a photo of her fiancé. I looked at the photo and thought, this man. When my husband made an unbelievable announcement, I was stunned. Because of this, Anna, your parents' house will become my sister's family home. Wait a minute, that house was left to me by my parents. It's not yours to decide. The whole family has decided. You, who live off my money, don't have a say in this. Was the man standing in front of me a devil in human skin? That house was a legacy from my father, a place I had hoped to make a home for any future children. James knew this. How could he be so selfish? My heart felt like it was reaching its breaking point. Adding insult to injury, my mother-in-law chimed in. You can't even give us a grandchild. Can't you at least be useful around the house for once? There was no one in this house who was on my side. I returned home, packed a few belongings hastily, and headed to my parents' house. With a resolute heart, I made the firm decision that I would never go back. A few days later, when I hadn't received any calls from my husband, I hoped he might have reconsidered. Then suddenly, the doorbell rang. Standing there were my husband and sister-in-law. What are you doing here? We thought we'd take a look around, my sister-in-law said, barging in. Despite my pleas for them to stop, they ignored me, snooping around the house and treating me as if I were invisible. This house is pretty nice. Too good for you, Anna. And when do you plan to move out? My sister's wedding is coming up soon. Get it together, my husband said, his tone unchanged. When I stayed silent, he added, if you don't want to get divorced, leave now. My husband, clearly confident that I wouldn't divorce him, was grinning alongside my sister-in-law. Got it, I said. My husband seemed pleased with my response, saying it was all he wanted to hear. Apparently, under the pretense of celebrating my sister-in-law's wedding, they were planning a long family-only trip starting the next day. Naturally, I wasn't included. My husband instructed me to pack up and leave by the time they returned. Then, with an air of excitement, he and my sister-in-law left. Watching them go, I allowed myself a small, mirthless smile. 2 weeks later, the day for my in-laws to return arrived. My phone had been ringing non-stop since morning, calls from my husband, as well as from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Finally, unable to ignore the barrage any longer, I answered the call. Hey Anna, where the hell are you? I'm at home, I replied. Liar, you're not at the apartment or at your parents' place. And what's with this? What are you talking about? Your family house. There's a for sale sign on it. Yeah, I put it up for sale. What? What are you talking about? Well, after you all left, I gave it some thought. The house you're in now just seems so dirty. I do like things to be clean after all. I'm divorcing you. Don't mess with me, my husband yelled. That was going to be my line. From now on, let's talk through our lawyers. With that, I hung up on him while he continued shouting. On the day my husband and sister-in-law returned, I had already been in touch with a contact, a friend of my father's who runs a real estate company. I didn't know much about selling houses, but my father's friend, who runs a real estate company, gave me some valuable advice, and we managed to secure a pretty good deal. As a side note, the apartment we had been living in was in my name, as my husband couldn't pass the screening process. Since I had no intention of returning there, I canceled the lease while they were away and sent all of my husband's belongings to his parents' house, cash on delivery. Despite this, I continued to receive calls from my in-laws, which I completely ignored. I recorded all the unbearable messages they left on my voicemail. According to my lawyer, my husband was hesitating, even though he had previously insisted on a divorce. It seemed he didn't want to lose his maid. I anticipated a long battle, but then, out of the blue, my husband agreed to the divorce. My lawyer informed me that my husband, mother-in-law, and sister-in-law had abruptly shown up at his office, insisting on processing the divorce quickly. My husband had been reluctant, but my mother-in-law convinced him that since my sister-in-law's new husband was wealthy, they could hire a new housekeeper with his money, rid themselves of a barren wife, and find a younger, newer one. With that, my husband agreed to the divorce. They even offered a small settlement on the condition that I would have no further involvement with them. Although I thought that was supposed to be my line, I decided to accept the offer. Not long after, my sister-in-law got remarried. Life quieted down significantly after that. Taking care of myself was much easier than I had anticipated. I deeply regretted not divorcing sooner. Now I'm finally free and ready to embrace my new life. Just as I was starting to settle into my new life, an unexpected incident occurred. Out of nowhere, my in-laws showed up at my new home. The moment I opened the door, they barged in, and my ex-husband demanded, "We need to talk. Sit down." Despite my irritation at their audacity, I took a seat. He then said, "Come back home. We forgive you." I was so stunned I could hardly speak. "Excuse me." I finally managed to reply. Desperate for them to leave, I quipped, "Oh, are you referring to your sister's husband? Has he vanished or something?" The three of them looked at each other in surprise as if to say, "How does she know about that?" My mother-in-law added with a hint of excitement, "Yes, he disappeared right after we registered our marriage. We can't reach him," she continued. "On top of that, he took off with her family's fortune. Did you have something to do with this? You've brought us nothing but bad luck, daughter-in-law." Her expression suggested she was ready to attack. Fed up with their baseless accusations, I decided to reveal a truth. "Wow, I didn't know your sister was such a fan of hamburgers." "What? Why are you talking about hamburgers all of a sudden? Don't you know that your sister's husband isn't an executive at a major company? He's just a part-timer at a hamburger shop." The sister-in-law froze, speechless. I continued with my story. "In my single days, my friend and I used to visit various hamburger shops. There was one particular place where an employee frequently made mistakes and got reprimanded by the manager. That man turned out to be the sister-in-law's husband. After I started dating my ex-husband, he insisted we stop going to burger joints, so I had given up that hobby. I had recognized the man from a photo the sister-in-law had proudly shown me, but I chose to stay silent and not interfere. When I showed her the shop's website for proof, she stared at her husband's picture in the background, her expression shifting to shock. I visited the shop recently with a friend, but he was no longer there. He must have left town," I added. "That's marriage fraud," she said in disbelief. "Seems like that's what they call it. I'm sorry for your loss." The mother-in-law, who had been silent until now, said, "You knew and didn't tell us. We took care of you for years despite you being unable to have children. You owe us." Her baseless accusations were the final straw. I decided to reveal a truth I had kept hidden. "First of all, I'm not the reason we couldn't have kids. Maybe my ex-husband can explain that to you." The mother-in-law stared at her son in shock, and he looked down, visibly uncomfortable. "When we struggled to conceive after our marriage, we followed through with testing at the insistence of my mother-in-law. The tests revealed no issues on my end, but my husband had a very low sperm count. The doctor informed us that he was the reason we couldn't have children. When my mother-in-law asked about the results, my husband lied and claimed that I was the problem. Though I was furious, they dismissed my concerns with comments like, 'You have to support your husband,' refusing to confront the truth. My ex-husband and mother-in-law had colluded to blame me entirely. "Look, I admit I was wrong," my ex-husband said. "Once the house sells, we'll have a nice chunk of money, right? Let's all be a family again and live happily." "Well, we've been through a lot, but let's try to get along from now on," my mother-in-law added. It was clear to me that they had come here with the intention of claiming my money. How despicable. "There's no chance I'm getting back together with you, and I don't consider any of you family." Upon hearing this, my ex-husband sneered, "Getting a bit high and mighty, aren't you? Even if you sold the house, you barely have any savings. How do you plan to manage?" It seemed he had sneaked a look at my bank account during our marriage and now wore a smug expression, as if to say, "Now that you know, do as you're told." Seeing the three of them smirking at my predicament, I decided it was time to drop a little truth bomb. "Sure, my savings aren't substantial," I began. "See, I told you so," my ex-husband said with a smirk. "But," I continued, "I've invested in stocks well enough to live comfortably without working for the next few years at least." Their faces fell as they stared at me in disbelief. Since childhood, my father had been passionate about stocks and investments. He had a knack for predicting market trends, and I inherited those skills. The money that funded my parents' move abroad came from those successful investments. Naturally, I had kept this financial cushion a secret from my opportunistic ex-family. Seeing their disappointment, I said, "You can leave now. And remember, according to our divorce agreement, if either party approaches the other without cause, there's a penalty. Do you want to cover it, or should I call the police for trespassing?" The mention of the police made them scramble to leave in a hurry. I immediately consulted my lawyer about the incident. He advised me to contact him if my ex-family tried to approach me again. As anticipated, once they discovered I had assets, my ex-husband began bombarding me with messages begging for reconciliation. He sent nostalgic photos from our past dates and creepy texts like, "I'm here right now thinking about those days, nearly every day." I considered blocking him but kept the messages as evidence, just in case. I wondered how he managed to text me so frequently while supposedly working, but it wasn't my concern. When he started reaching out to my friends, I decided I'd had enough and sent him a firm warning. I'll report this to the police if it continues. I included a photo of our divorce agreement and the contact information for the nearest police station. After that, the messages stopped and I never heard from him again. I thanked my lawyer, who then revealed a surprising detail. My ex-husband had quit his job to live off his sister's new husband and was now struggling. It seemed he had foolishly left a decent job at a reputable company. I just wanted to let you know that the documents you requested should be arriving soon, I informed my lawyer. I had made an additional request unrelated to this case. Shortly after we got married, I began noticing that my personal belongings were mysteriously disappearing. First, it was a necklace I had bought for myself before marriage, then a fountain pen my parents had gifted me as a job starter, along with various bags and rings. The fountain pen, in particular, was something I treasured deeply. When I confronted my husband about these losses, he dismissed my concerns, saying, "Don't worry about losing things." Suspicious of his dismissive attitude, I secretly installed a surveillance camera. The footage revealed my husband and mother-in-law rummaging through my closet, smirking. After my sister-in-law moved back in, the footage showed 3 people taking advantage of my absence. Their activities escalated to selling my personal items for cash, possibly driven by the balance they saw in my bank account. This continued until our divorce, and I gathered ample physical evidence of their actions. Seeing that they expected me to remain silent, I decided to file for damages and compensation for emotional distress. They must be in a panic now, but it's their own fault. As for the aftermath, my sister-in-law's ex-husband learned about the theft and took custody of their daughter. I felt a sense of relief when I saw the little girl out shopping with her father, happily holding hands. She seemed joyful, something I never saw when she was at my in-laws. The 3 of them, who had hoped to live comfortably off my assets, applied for welfare but were rejected due to their good health. My husband's pride prevented him from finding another job. Eventually, he ended up begging at his old workplace, only to be turned away. The company, which had hoped he would quit, ended up calling the police, something he despised. He now struggles to find work, resorting to day labor jobs. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law, who had to pay me compensation, took up part-time jobs at a local supermarket. Having never worked before, they struggled with the unfamiliar tasks. Coincidentally or not, since their arrival, the supermarket's sales have plummeted, earning them the unwelcome nickname, the plague-bringing mother and daughter. By the way, the marriage scammer is still at large. I had assumed they owned the house they were living in, but it turned out to be a rental. Unable to pay the rent, the 3 of them were forced to move into a dilapidated apartment that's notorious in the neighborhood. Their lives have become a struggle, and they seem to be constantly at each other's throats. Recently, the police were even called due to the loud arguments. As for me, their actions inadvertently turned out to be a blessing. I sold the house and used the proceeds to start a new apparel company with a former colleague. Business has been booming, we've been gaining more customers and have even been featured in magazines and on TV. Returning to the job I love has brought me immense happiness. Additionally, I've met a wonderful man through work and we're planning to get married. His family has welcomed me warmly and they treat me with great kindness. We're also expecting a baby and I'm thrilled to become the mother I've always dreamed of next year. I'm currently the happiest I've ever been in my life.